This is the Gridiron Guesser, the premier guesser in all of sports.
Hey, and welcome back to the Gridiron Guesser. We've got 6 picks for you this week after getting punched right in the last week. Once again, we had 3 bad beats in the closing seconds of games that really f***ed us. But we do what all winners do, and that's get right back up and fight on. So if you're a winner, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and like this video. Just do it. Doesn't cost you anything. It's not some scam. Just subscribe, like our videos, and let's f***ing go. On to our 6 money picks for Week 6. Game number 1. We've got 5-0 Maryland heading to 4-0 Ohio State for a noon kickoff this Saturday. The Buckeyes are a 20-point favorite with a total set at 57 points. The Buckeyes had Week 5 off after getting their last second win on the road at Notre Dame in Week 4, while the Terrapins beat the hell out of a Indiana team. The money numbers on this one show us that Ohio State is only 1-3 against the spread so far this season, while the Terrapins are a respectable 3-2. The last time Maryland played at Ohio State, they failed to cover a 21-point spread, and in fact, the visiting team is 0-5 against the spread in the last 5 meetings. So what's going to happen? As we mentioned, the last time Maryland went to Ohio State, they got absolutely murdered 66-17 as a 21-point underdog. And that was just 2 seasons ago. Last season, Maryland was able to cover a 17-point spread, but lost 43-30. Maryland's defense has been impressive so far this season, and their offense is humming right along with nearly 39 points per game and averaging over 5 yards per rushing attempt. This will be the best offense the Buckeyes have faced to this point in the season. Ohio State has had a week off to enjoy their win over Notre Dame and should be healthy for this week's matchup. Expect this game to be a high-scoring affair. Both defenses have looked strong this season, but these offenses are going to be too good to stop all day. McCord will connect with Harrison for several big plays, including a couple of scores, and Tagovailoa will make several plays of his own as the Buckeyes and Terrapins trade blows back and forth. The running games will keep the defenses honest and open the way for the quarterbacks to hit even more throws down the field in the second half. Maryland is a good team. This is the best Maryland team head coach Mike Locksley has had so far, but there's just too much talent on Ohio State's team for Maryland to be able to match them blow for blow all day and come out on top. Maryland is going to cover that 20-point spread this time in a game that will be close into the fourth quarter. The Gridiron Guesser is taking the Buckeyes to win the game 38-28, but give us Maryland to cover. For game number 2 this week, we head down to Dallas for the annual Red River rivalry between the Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas Longhorns. Texas is a 5-point favorite with a total set at 60.5. So last year, Texas whipped Oklahoma 49-0. Texas comes into this year having looked impressive with that road win over Alabama and a total beatdown of Baylor and Kansas the last 2 weeks. Oklahoma comes in at 5-0, but doesn't really have that signature win to this point of the season. That could all change this weekend with a win over the Longhorns. The money numbers here tell us that OU has been a covering machine so far this season, while the Longhorns have been a kind of pedestrian 3-2 against the spread. Texas won the game last year 49-0, but this is a different OU team than Texas faced last year. The Longhorns come in only 5-5 in their last 10 games against the spread. So what's going to happen? This is going to be a much closer game than it was a year ago. Don't be fooled thinking that last year's score makes any difference for this year. The Sooners are playing much better defensively than last season and should be able to slow down the Longhorns enough to hang around in this game. Quarterback Dylan Gabriel has been fantastic so far for OU, throwing for over 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns, and the Sooners will need him to have a big day to pull off this upset. The Longhorns and Sooners are both pretty good defending the run, so look for Gabriel and Ewers to be key in this game. The Sooners are better in Brent Venables' second year, but they're not good enough to beat this Texas team. Texas has already passed multiple tests this season, while Oklahoma has built up a 5-0 record without really having to break a sweat. The Longhorns are too good at the line of scrimmage for the Sooners to be able to make a serious run at this upset. Expect a close game for a half or so before the Longhorns begin to wear down the Sooners at the line of scrimmage and reel off several big plays to break it open. The Gridiron Guesser likes the Longhorns to win and cover 38-24 over the Sooners. Game number 3 is our first of 3 SEC matchups this week in Week 6. We've got the ego-bruised LSU Tigers going to Missouri to take on a surprising 5-0 Tiger squad. LSU is a 4-point favorite with a total set at 65. LSU lost a shootout on the road last week to Ole Miss, while Missouri grabbed a win on the road against Vanderbilt. LSU is no doubt going to have to regroup this week as the loss to the Rebels knocked them out of playoff contention, which was one of their goals coming into the season. As for Missouri, things couldn't be better for Eli Drinkwitz and his group as they are 5-0, which includes a win over number 15 Kansas State back in Week 3. When we look at the money numbers here, one thing that really stands out to us is that LSU is 3-7 against the spread in their last 10 road games, including last week in the outright loss to Ole Miss. Missouri has fared okay at home, going 6-6 against the spread in their last 12 against the SEC West, and the over seems to be a good play for both teams this season. So what's going to happen? The Gridiron Guesser picked against Missouri a few weeks ago when the Tigers hit that 61-yard field goal to beat Kansas State. Yes, that game could have went either way, but Missouri won it, and that's all that matters. Since then, they've looked okay against Memphis and Vanderbilt. LSU has shown over the last couple of weeks to really be struggling on defense. LSU gave up 31 to Arkansas, then 55 last week to the Rebels. Jaden Daniels in the offense has been playing really well, but the defense has not been what the Bayou Bengals needed this year if they were really going to compete for a playoff spot. Is LSU really good enough on the defensive side of the ball to cover 4 points on the road to a team with so much momentum right now? LSU was a 6.5-point favorite just a day ago. Missouri will have to play their best game of the season to hang in this one. Jaden Daniels and LSU are going to score points, and Missouri will have to be efficient on the offensive side to have a chance to get the win. And it's also important to remember here, where is LSU's mentality after a second loss of the season last week that dashed their playoff hopes? They can still win the SEC West, so we don't think it's going to be that much of an issue. We're expecting a good one here. Both teams will score more times than not when they have the ball. There will be tons of yards. Jaden Daniels and Brady Cook will both be phenomenal. Luther Burden from Missouri will show the country that he's one of the best receivers in the nation. But Brady Cook is going to throw his first interception of the season, and that's going to be the difference in this one. LSU escapes Columbia with a win, but the Missouri Tigers cover that 4-point spread. The Gridiron Guesser is taking the points, but LSU wins late 37-34. In game number 4, a rejuvenated Alabama Crimson Tide team with what feels like new life heads west to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. The Tide are a 1-point favorite with a total set at 46. Alabama seems to have found something over the last several weeks with an impressive win over Ole Miss, followed up by a total beatdown of Mississippi State last week. As for the Aggies, they come off a total kicking of Arkansas last week in Jerry World with a backup quarterback Max Johnson at the controls. The Tide and Aggies have both looked strong on defense over the last several weeks of action. Let's take a look at these money numbers. Texas A&M is 4-1 against the spread this season and has covered 4 of the last 6 meetings against the Tide. Alabama is just 3-8 against the spread as a road favorite in their last 11 games, and the home team in this series is 7-4 against that spread. So what's going to happen? The line on this one has seen a huge shift from Alabama laying 2.5 all the way down to only 1. Rumors are swirling that Jalen Milroe injured himself in practice this week and may not play. But nothing has been confirmed as of now, so we're going to go with that's just a rumor. The Aggies are going to do everything they can to rattle Milroe. The Aggies were able to get to KJ Jefferson in Arkansas last week for 15 tackles for lost yardage. With the questionable offensive line play for the Tide, expect a similar game plan this week from Texas A&M. Alabama has looked to come together over the last 2 weeks, but this game at A&M will be the true test to see if Alabama is a contender or not this season. The Aggies will once again go with Max Johnson at quarterback, who played well against the Hogs last week, despite throwing a pick 6 to start the second half. Johnson will have to avoid that this week because giving Alabama a turnover could spell doom. This matchup will be a physical one, as both teams try to establish the running game to open up more throwing lanes down the field. Bobby Petrino seems to be just starting to cook with the Aggies offense, and that has to be a concern for Alabama DC Kevin Steele. The Gridiron Guesser sees this being a tough, physical matchup that racks up the yards, but not necessarily a ton of points. Both teams will probably move the ball between the 20s, but the defenses won't break often. Milroe and company will have their moments, and Max Johnson will connect with Evan Stewart and others on a few big hits down the field. But the Alabama defense will win this game for the Tide with a couple of big takeaways that lead to points. In a game that will be a nail-biter throughout, the Gridiron Guesser is taking the Alabama Crimson Tide to win and cover in a slugfest, 20-17. Game 5 of our Week 6 picks is another huge SEC matchup, this time in the SEC East with undefeated Kentucky traveling to Athens to take on defending national champion Georgia. The Bulldogs are laying 14.5 points, and the total is set at 47.5. Kentucky dismantled Florida last week in what really was their first impressive outing of the season. And damn, did they look good. Georgia once again seemed to get off to a slow start against Auburn on the road, but eventually got things going as Carson Beck repeatedly found Brock Bowers, which led to the deciding touchdown in a 27-20 win. The money numbers on this one show us that the Wildcats are 4-1 on the season against the spread, while the Bulldogs are 0-5. The Wildcats have covered the last 4 games in this series, while Georgia has won 13 in a row and pretty much owns this matchup historically. So what's going to happen? Before last week, there were a million questions about Kentucky. Sure, they had beaten everyone on the schedule, but hadn't looked very impressive doing it. Then came last week's beatdown of Florida. Now everyone suddenly is a believer in Mark Stoops and the Wildcats. But hold up there. Was beating Florida that big of a deal? Outside of a second-half performance against Tennessee, Florida hasn't looked very impressive at all. So good for Kentucky on winning 3 in a row over the Gators. But we don't think last week's win was as big as many others seem to think it was. As for Georgia, they struggled on the road at rival Auburn, needing a touchdown from all-world Brock Bowers in the final minutes to secure the win. The Bulldogs turned the ball over a couple times and didn't dominate an Auburn team that wasn't expected to put up much of a fight. So what gives here in this game? Is Georgia still trying to find their identity this season? Yes. Is Kentucky really any good? Yes. This game is going to be an all-out, old-fashioned SEC fight. Devin Leary and Ray Davis for the Wildcats are ready for this game. Leary will protect the ball, hit a few important throws, and Davis will be able to find some holes to keep the Bulldogs' defense close to the line. Kentucky has a solid line up front, and that gives the Wildcats a chance in this one. Georgia will be tough to beat at home, especially at night, but don't be surprised when the Bulldogs have a hard time putting away this one. The Wildcats will slow down the Bulldogs' run game and force Carson Beck to throw the ball, and he will. Brock Bowers will have another outstanding performance, which will include a couple more touchdowns, and the Bulldogs will clamp down on Kentucky late in the game once the Wildcats begin to fade under the pressure of the moment. This game will be a one-score game into the fourth quarter, and it could even go the Wildcats' way if they force a couple of turnovers. The Gridiron Guesser likes the Bulldogs to find a way to get the win at home in a classic 28-21, but the Wildcats are going to get the cover for the 5th straight time. Our 6th and final pick for Week 6 features Notre Dame Fighting Irish on the road once again as they head to undefeated Louisville. The Irish are a 6.5-point favorite with a point total set at 54. Notre Dame came through in the end last week when it mattered most to escape Duke with a 21-14 win. The Cardinals needed a 53-yard field goal to get past NC State 13-10 to remain unbeaten. Here the money numbers show us that Notre Dame has been excellent this season, going 5-1-1 against the spread, while also being 4-1 against the spread as a road favorite over their last 5 games. The Cardinals are only 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 home games and just 2-2 against the spread this season. So what's going to happen? Notre Dame has beaten ACC opponents in 30 straight contests. Yes, 30 straight. So is Louisville going to be the team to end that streak? They could be. Louisville comes in at 5-0 in Jeff Brom's first year as the head coach. Both teams will come into this one with a solid running attack. Estime for Notre Dame leads the nation in rushing yards, while Louisville's Jahar Jordan leads the ACC in rushing yards per game. The quarterbacks have thrown for a lot of yards as well, as both Sam Hartman and Jake Plummer have thrown for over 1,400 yards through the air. But Plummer has tossed 6 interceptions, while Hartman has thrown 0. Expect both teams to feed the running game and try to take control early. Hartman threw 3 interceptions last season against Louisville when he played for Wake Forest, but don't expect that to happen again. Hartman will be efficient, The Irish will move the ball on the ground and through the air, and the Irish defense will be able to slow down Jordan much like NC State did last week against the Cardinals. The Irish won't run away with this one, but they are the better team here. The Gridiron Guesser likes the Irish to make it 31 straight with a win and a cover over Louisville, 31-17. So there you have it, our 6 picks for Week 6 of the college football season. Go ahead, subscribe, just do it. It doesn't cost you anything, it's not a scam. Just do it, subscribe, and like our videos. Thanks for watching, enjoy the games this weekend, everyone, and we'll see you next week on the Gridiron Guesser.